think I get it now. I think I cracked it. I cracked it. Okay. I was literally all this stuff in the circuit. I was like, I'm so stupid. But it works. I think it
Please
works.
help me because I'm also.
I figured out the 6, which is a lot. And I figured out 7.
Straight up.
This one.
Okay.
What did you have done?
Bro. I don't even play.
Oh.
So sad.
I'm not even
Yeah, I restarted.
Like, guaranteed.
I'm so disappointed in my work.
If I don't know singles, I don't know about that. Yeah, I don't know.
No idea.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say it's not even late, but
We didn't have to turn it in last period.
Yeah, bro.
I finally remembered to bring this up. It could be like 8th grade. Classroom is. I was here, but like I just kind of pushed through.
I know she told me that.
Trust that you learn so late, bro. I don't know why
Absolutely not.
The literal next day.
Like I teach you I was going fucking crazy for this work. And I was looking at this and I got in here. What are the last ones? I'm really sorry. I think I'll get lost. I gotta restart. You just said on freezing cold names. I got it now.
Because you don't have to send it out after. She is going to hang out It's like her grandma lives in Ohio.
Not today.
I wasn't here on Tuesday, but I think we took in the.
I'll bring it back in.
Thank you so much. I
I need to see what my picture.
All right, here's your sticky protractor.
Did you check if like for the days I had missed if this was late? Because I knew that I turned it in past the due date, but I thought for like every day I missed, I got a day.
If there's one that you think's wrong, I can double check it for you, but I thought I did.
Okay.
I tried to load it.
Well,
Yeah, just double check and then if you think I'm wrong, I will.
is it every in-school day or just day?
It's day, but it's like if you missed it, if they turned in something on a Monday and you weren't there, you need to turn it in the next class. So I don't know, it could have been something like that.
I missed like 2 classes in a row.
Oh, okay. Well, it could be I need to double check it, but I thought I had it right.
I have Monday and Tuesday I've been. Well, we saw
Okay, guys, let's get started, please. Okay. I need to remind you that, guys, Johnny, sit down. We've got our test coming up, our second test coming up next class. So if you've not gotten out the test review number 28, you need to do that while I give you some reminders here. So 28 is a pretty long test review, but I did ask that you start working through it and aim for about half of it, even if it was the easy half, for a couple of reasons. One is having half of it done means that you should be able to finish this up in class, figure out what else you need help with, and have time to get all that answered since it's the last time I see you before then. Although I guess you guys could sign up for advisory on Tuesday, and that would work out for you too. But then also, you going through some of these questions, putting your eyes on some of these questions, probably helped you find a few things that you already know you need help on. So in just a minute, I will take any questions that you have ready to go. But with our second unit coming up, I need to give you late work reminder. So remember, I do take late work. I also take incomplete work. You can get half of those points back, but only if it's 100% completed, no missing questions, and I get it before the quiz test. So if it's something that you could have uploaded on Google Classroom, you can turn your late work into Google Classroom. It emails me when you turn that stuff in. Or you can give me a hard copy before we start the quiz on Tuesday, not after, not later that day, not later that period, but before the quiz. That's perfectly fine too. The only one that's kind of a little bit different is the Khan Academy. I don't get a notice if you go back and work on those after the fact. So if you did not get 100 on those Khan Academy assignments, did not get 100 on that assignment, you can still get half of those points back if you go back and do it the way you were supposed to do it. But you need to email me and tell me if it's the Khan Academy. The rest, I can take hard copies or Google Classroom, and I can figure it out from there. I probably should have said this a couple classes ago, but I kind of forgot just because we got wrapped up in other stuff. But remember, you are always welcome to come and see your assessments during advisory. I don't care if you come next week or in March, but everybody has taken the limits quiz as of a few class periods ago. I usually keep this stuff up here, so when students miss, I'll put their name over here. That helps me kind of remember. So anytime you want to come and look at that, you are welcome to. You may not remember, but with that quiz, there was 22 points you could earn, but I only graded it out of 20, so there was a little bit of a curve. So if you're thinking, well, gradebook shows that I made 100, so I don't need to come look at it, it could be that you missed 2 questions, and it was just after the curve you still got 100. So it's still good for you to come and look at that. But that will be the same with our Unit 2 test. You won't be allowed to see it until they're all made up.
Is there a curve for the test?
Unit 2 will probably have a small curve, but that one typically we just kind of wait and see what they look like. So I don't know that this matters to you guys, but I have to put this information together anyway for one of my evaluators. So if you're interested, your Unit 1 quiz, how you guys did before curve and after curve compared to the other classes, they're all almost identical, so not much variation there. Again, I don't know that that means much other than if you made a 75 and you weren't happy with that, well, it doesn't seem like other people struggled quite as much, so it could mean that you need to study more, I guess. I don't know, but some perspective at least. Okay, so all we need to do this class period, this is your review day, so I need to give you class time to finish up this test review. Again, it's a long test review, which is why I gave it to you part for homework and an entire class period to work on it. But this test review should help push you in the right direction here on what you need to study. So if you treat this test review like a practice test, then you'll think the actual test is pretty easy in comparison. But if you didn't notice the layout of this, let me go ahead and talk about that real quick before I take any of the questions you have ready to go. So even though the test review looks kind of long, it really just focuses on one thing at a time. So like the first one is standard definition of a derivative versus alternate version of a derivative. Those are two things you need to memorize if you haven't yet. So it puts those down so that you can go look them up in your binder. You realize, hey, these are things I need to know. And then it asks a couple questions about those. 3, 4, 5, it's got 3 questions. And so if those 3 questions seem easy to you, you check your answers with the website and you got them all right, then there's a good chance you don't need to study this skill and you can check it off and realize that I don't need to spend any more time on this skill. I'll worry about other skills. But if after doing that you missed 1 or 2 of those, or you weren't confident and you realize that when you see this on the test, it's one that you're going to feel a little shaky on, I did already pre-link most of these skills where you could get some extra practice. So if this ends up being a skill that you know you need extra practice on, then go out there and get the extra practice. I think this link takes you to the same Khan Academy that you guys did a couple classes ago. But again, if you haven't gotten enough practice there, then at least there's an easy way for you to get it. While I'm here, question 5 accidentally had a typo on it. So I had retyped question 4 and 5 from last year because the answer choices didn't print off very well. Like they're just not legible. And within that, I made a typo here. 5D, this is supposed to say G prime of 1. Otherwise, B and D were the exact same. So change that option D so that you're not confused why those look the same. Okay, but then basically the same thing. The next little section, make sure that you know what power rule says. 1 question practice, and then if you know you need extra practice, there's 3 different places you can go get more power rule practice. Then you know product rule is going to be on your test. The test review is making sure you know the formula, gives you a couple practice questions. If those are going great, then check it off as I've got the skill down. If it's not, if you're not there yet, consider practicing using the links there. And then do that for all of the skills, and that should tell you where your focus needs to be as far as your studying goes. Okay, so now that all that's out of the way, again, if you guys worked on some of this as I had suggested to make sure that you can finish this and get all your questions answered, since this is the last time I see you before the test, ideally you have already found a few that you know you need help on, so there's no reason to wait. Let's just go ahead and answer those and then move forward. So, is there any questions? Yeah.
It's not a question about that, but do we need to turn in 27 today?
Is 27 the circuit?
Yeah.
I'm not taking up the circuit today only because if there's a chance I can't grade them and get them back to you and you wanted it to study. So next class, I'm taking up the circuit 27 and the test review 28. Both of those should be opened up in Google Classroom now if you want to turn them in early. Yeah, I tend to not try to take up stuff on review day, again, only because there's a chance I may not grade it and get it back to you, depending on how many questions you guys have. You know, I don't know. I can't anticipate how much help you're going to want. So,
Did you do number 3?
number 3, sure. Okay, number 3. If the function is 2x squared plus 4, which of the following would calculate the derivative of f? Okay, so if I start looking at all of these answer choices, I can see, to me, all of these look most like the standard definition. So to work this question, you'll have to have the standard definition of a derivative memorized, which is this. Now sometimes instead of saying h is just, if you remember what h was the distance you move from the first point to the second point. So sometimes instead of h, they'll say delta x. Delta x just means the change in x. Delta x. So this is what I'm thinking about in my head when I'm looking at those answer choices. See if I can pull it up here. So why could choice A why is there no chance choice A is correct? Right. This is the limit definition of the derivative. It's got to have the limit. So immediately choice A and choice D should be thrown out because neither one of them even have the limit piece. Okay, that narrows it down to these two. And delta x, limit as delta x approaches 0, limit as delta x approaches 0, minus 2x squared plus 4, minus 2x squared plus 4. All that stuff's the same. Stuff that's different is this. So let me look at the function again. The function was 2x squared plus 4. And in this part of the definition, this is supposed to be f of x plus h, or f of x plus delta x. So if I replace x with x plus delta x, this would be x plus delta x squared plus 4. And that looks like choice C, not choice B. Are you okay with that? Okay. Honestly, with this type of using the standard definition and the alternate form, again, College Board's doing you a favor by not ever making you take a derivative the long way this way. But they do ask questions like these where you've got to recognize them well enough that you guys can piece them together. And that just takes a lot of practice to get better at that. That's where the Khan Academy might be nice. All right, John, what do you got? Nothing? Did you do your homework? Okay, what else y'all got ready to go?
Number 18.
18. Okay, if I remember right, I think we actually did 18, this exact question in your notes, but there's a few different good things for you to get out of this. One is, for sure, on your test at least once, you're going to have to know the relationship from velocity to acceleration. So how can you take velocity and learn something about acceleration? Okay, so if I want to know the acceleration at 1.5, the first thing you have to know is that's the same as the derivative of the velocity at 1.5. So, well, you don't realize this yet, but you can take this derivative you've got something times something, so you could do the product rule. The derivative of t times sine of t squared plus t times the derivative of sine of t squared. And the derivative of sine something is cosine something. And then because of chain rule, you need to multiply by 2t. You okay with that? Okay, then this is the derivative in terms of t. So if you want to know that derivative at 1.5, everywhere there's a t, you could put in 1.5. So this is where you would probably realize, I probably should have written this on your page, but you're going to have to use a calculator here because we know what 1.5 squared is. 3 over 2 squared is 9/4, but you don't know the sine of 9/4 or the cosine of 9/4. Those aren't unit circle values. So at some point, don't look at this. Okay. Y'all are looking. I told you not to look. I can't find it. I've got to type it back in again. Oh, man. Okay, can you tell me what that said? What would you type in your calculator?
Sine of 1.5 squared times...
Hold on. Okay, sine of 1.5 squared. Okay.
Times 1.5 cosine 1.5 squared times 3.
Like that? Okay, so you could do this. Now, as I said, even if you felt good about this question, you checked the answer and you got it right, there's a few things you can get out of this. One, I did this. I typed it in. This answer is not correct. So what could possibly be wrong, assuming I typed it in right? Right. Everything we do in calculus is in radians. So sometimes you're going to get lucky, you're going to be in degree mode, and you're going to get the answer right. But if you're doing anything trig related, sine, cosine, tangent, any of that stuff, your calculator has to be in radians. All higher mathematics is in radians. So you could do that. That still doesn't look right though. I'm not sure if I wrote that down correctly. That last part, that is 3. This one? Okay. So as I said, I can't go back and forth very well. Okay, so there's the actual answer. But notice, if you were in degree mode, there's nothing obviously wrong about that. I mean, that answer looks about as likely as this answer, but this bottom one is correct. Okay, so the other thing I want you to learn out of this is if you had to use a calculator on this anyway, meaning this would have to be on the calculator portion of the test if I wanted you to go this far, there's a much smarter way to do this than what I did. And it concerns me that it doesn't jump out at you. My second period, no one was able to figure it out. Say what?
Calculate the slope.
Okay, how are you going to do that?
Y 2 minus y1 over x 2 minus x.
That's only going to work if you're estimating looking at something linear. T times sine of t squared is far from linear. It changes over time.
Divide by t, since acceleration is change velocity over time.
Okay, that might work. I'm not confident enough to say yes or no to that. Even easier though. Yeah.
Is there like a
I'm sorry?
Is there like a
Yes. We haven't talked about it a lot because it's still pretty early in the year. But if you have a calculator and you are asked to take the derivative of something, your calculator, alpha window, option 3, it can take a derivative for you. You don't have to do that question and do the product, even though you should be able to do the product rule and chain rule and all of that stuff, and you will certainly be tested on that. But sometimes you're going to see things you cannot take the derivative of. But if you know your calculator can take the derivative at a specific point, just let it do the work. So if you needed a calculator at the end of the question anyway, it would be a calculator question. And if it's a calculator question, you don't need to do it by hand. Just let your calculator do it. And again, if you guys don't put that in your thought process, at some point this year you will get a test question that I let you use a calculator on, and it will literally be a derivative you cannot do by hand. So you might try for 10 or 15 minutes or something and be very confused and frustrated when you could have just been done in 10 seconds. So, okay, so I'm sure that's more than you wanted, but did that at least clear up what you needed of that? Okay.
Yeah, I was like, that's a domain error, but it's not a 2.255.
It just, yeah.
Could you show the answer for
The answer to 22?
23.
23?
Yeah.
It's always just given to you in the question. We have to tell you where, if we want you to come up with the equation of a tangent line, you need to be able to write a linear line. You need to know the slope comes from the derivative. The y value can come from plugging x1 into the function. This is from x1 into the derivative. But if I expect you to give me the equation of a tangent line, I've got to tell you where it is, and the where is going to be the x1 value, so I just have to say it.
Okay.
So it's really the slope and the point that you need to know the difference. Plug in x values into the function if you're trying to find points of the function. Plug in the x value into the derivative if you're trying to find slopes of the function. And pretty soon, a few weeks from now, we'll be plugging numbers into the second derivative for something else as well. Anybody have any idea what the second derivative measures? Just out of curiosity?
Of what?
Just the function. If this is a function, what is the first derivative measure? Okay. So slope, 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 slope. So the second derivative measures the slope of the slopes, which is the change in slope.
Over the change.
How do you, but what's that got to do with this picture?
Just
Change slope minus change slope over.
It has to do with concavity. You see how this slope's getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller? We can measure whether something's concave down like this or concave up like that with second derivative. So you don't need to know that for this test. I was just curious if y'all could guess it. 26, sure. We already talked about third derivative, right? Don't be a third derivative.
yeah.
All right, 26. Find an equation of the tangent line if the function was tan theta at the point pi over 4, 1. Okay, so again, those first couple questions are just trying to outline to you. This is a basics you have to have memorized to have a shot at these question types. So the equation of a tangent line is always linear. Start off with point slope. In the notes, I told you the x value would be given to you. So in place of x1, put pi over 4. In the previous notes, I said to find the y value, oftentimes you need to plug in the x value. Now, do I plug the x value into the function or to the derivative if I want to know the point? The what?
The point, you do it to the function.
And the function. You've been finding points since Algebra 1. You didn't know anything about derivative in Algebra 1. So if I plug in pi over 4 to this, what is the tangent of pi over 4? Okay, that's also on your desk. But notice this particular question they told us. They went ahead and did that for us. Sometimes you need to find that one though. But the x value, y value, x value is pi over 4, y value is 1. But if you need to know the slope is going to come from the derivative at that x value. So you're going to have to know the derivative of tangent is secant squared. If you want to know the slope or derivative at pi over 4, you need to try to think about what is the secant of pi over 4 squared. Since that happens to be a unit circle thing, at pi over 4, cosine is square root of 2 over 2. So secant would be 2 over the square root of 2, and then if you square it, you're going to get 4 over 2, which reduces to 2. So they gave you the full point, x and y, although you could have figured out the y by plugging in the x value into the function. And you had to find the slope, and you find the slope from derivative, because derivative and slope, you need to think of those as the same thing. Sometimes when you need a derivative answer, you have to think about slope. Sometimes when you want a slope, you need to think about derivative. Now, if you look at our answer choices, none of the answer choices look like this. I have no idea why they chose to simplify it the way that they did. But again, this is an actual released AP question from years and years ago. So this is the way we'll practice it all year. But for me to figure out which one of those it is, I mean, I don't know. I just have to play with it. I could distribute the 2. I don't know. I could, well, I'm looking at all their answer choices and none of them have a fraction in it. So let me multiply everything by 2. So now my work doesn't have a fraction in it. And it's looking like C to me. So what I'm seeing is if I subtract the 2y over, and if I add the pi over, then it looks like choice C. Again, there's not any rhyme or reason to why they're simplifying that way, but I knew I had to play with it and try to make it look like theirs. So, and that's where all of our simplifying work hopefully pays off a little bit. I realized that longer book assignment we did and the circuit from last class, some of those questions are a borderline nightmare to do all the simplifying. But if we don't practice doing common denominators and distributing and factoring out GCFs and stuff, then some days you're going to be able to do the calculus and then you're not going to have any idea of how to try to make it look different so that you can get the right answer. So, okay, is that enough for this question? Is anybody else going to ask about it? Have anything else to ask? Okay, what else have you found that you know you need help with? Yeah. Did we already look over 4? We have not. Okay. So do you think this looks more like the standard definition or the alternative definition of the derivative? Okay, I agree. So the standard looks like this. And then looking at all this, some of this stuff was supposed to be there. Divided by h was supposed to be there. Limit as h approaches 0 was supposed to be there.
Wait, so it's H? Or sorry, is B or C one of the answers? Or can we eliminate A and D?
Okay, why could you eliminate a or d?
Because X looks like it's could be 3.
Okay, so it looks like they're trying to find the derivative at 3 if they're plugging in 3 for x. So that's exactly right. They're not taking the derivative at 0. So that does narrow it down to B or C. Okay, and then they use this. If this is supposed to be the function, this could be the function in terms of x, or they might plug in x. So the function must be what?
3.
No, that's what they're plugging into the function. What is the function? What are they plugging 3 into here? You've only got two choices. They're either plugging it into 2 to the x power or 2 to the x 3 plus x power.
It looks like just plugging in X.
That's correct. Because if they were plugging it into this, that would be a 6, not a 3. So, there you go.
Awesome, thank you.
Can we do number 7?
Okay, number 7. Okay, so number 7, if you really, really, really wanted to do the quotient rule, you could, but it's going to be a lot easier if you rewrite this as x to the negative 5, because then you can just do power rule instead. So bring the power down, lower the power by 1. You generally need to simplify it, but for this question I guess you don't have to, but they want you to plug in 2 for x. So your answer should come from negative 5 over 2 to the 6th power, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. So anytime you can rewrite it and just do the power rule tends to be easier, but if you really want to do quotient rule there, go for it. You should end up with the same answer. And of course, if you had a calculator, just let your calculator do it. Your calculator could do this question in milliseconds, and then there's no chance you get it wrong. Of course, I would not put this on the calculator part of a test, though. Okay, others you have ready? Yeah. I thought you didn't have any questions.
That was before I got to 39.
All right. 39 is probably the hardest one on the test review, in my opinion. If you've not tried 39 yet, you can either go there with us now, or you can watch, I have a video of this question from earlier. I guess before you even start this though, you have to know what this is asking for. So I brought this up in question 37. If dy over dx means the derivative of y with respect to x, everything we're doing right now is with respect to x, so that doesn't matter. What did d squared y over dx squared mean? All right, second derivative. That's important that you're aware of that, because otherwise you don't know that it wants you to find the second derivative of this. So you're going to have to start off by taking the first derivative, which is going to be power rule. Bring the power down. Lower the power by 1. And don't forget chain rule. You okay with that part? Okay. And I want to simplify this as much as I can before I try to take the derivative again. So I'm going to say 3 times 6 is 18. And that's about all I can do. But now that I know what the first derivative is, I can take the derivative of the first derivative to get the second derivative. So it's going to be 18 times, I've got x times 3x squared minus 1 squared. So for this half, you're going to have to use product rule. Derivative of x with 3x squared minus 1 squared left alone, plus x left alone, times the derivative of 3x squared minus 1 squared. So you're going to have to bring the power down, lower the power by 1, and take the derivative of the inside for chain rule. Okay, you okay with all of that mess? Okay, well, this is the second derivative. It's just kind of messy, so we got to clean it up until we can figure out which one of these answer choices it is. So 1 times something is just going to be the something. Over here I've got a 2 times a 6, an x times an x, and a 3x squared minus 1. Okay, this is the step that scares me a little bit, because nobody in second period today could tell me what the next algebra step is, even though it's probably the easiest algebra thing you've ever learned. What?
Factor.
Factor what? Very good. GCF. This has a 3x squared minus 1, and this has a 3x squared minus 1. We can factor out a 3x squared minus 1, which leaves behind a 1 3x squared minus 1 and a plus 12x squared. And then when you combine those two together, you see it's choice A. So obviously I know you guys can factor out a greatest common factor, but unfortunately you don't always do a good job of seeing that without being told that. So notice my underlined blue there. Both of those had a 3x squared minus 1, so I just pulled it out. I just factored it out front, and that was the key to make my second derivative look like their derivative.
How come you don't have to do the product rule of the 18 when you just multiply that?
Well, you can if you want to, but this is the constant multiple rule. So like question 45, if you have a constant, if you want the derivative of a constant times a function, you can just multiply the derivative by that constant. It's just going to make it however many times bigger. So just like, I don't know, what's the derivative of x? Okay, so if I make it 100x, what's the derivative? It's 100 times whatever the derivative of x was. So most of the time if there's a constant, you just want to pull it out front, and just that way you don't have to complicate your question anymore. It's just along for the ride. Limits work the same way. So okay, I'm glad you guys have lots of questions. I appreciate that. But is there others that you have ready to go? Because if you do, let's just keep going. Okay, then let me give you about 15 minutes to keep working ahead, and then I will give you another chance. Of course, I do have the solutions for this stuff on the website, so you should either be checking your work as you go, or at the very least as you finish. And like most of our assignments, there's a ton of these that have already been pre-worked out as videos on the website. So. Good question. Depends on the question. take the derivative and then set it equal to 0. Okay, right here. This over t over t over t. It doesn't look like you ever did anything with that denominator. When you take this derivative, you're going to have to do quotient rule because you got something over something. So take the derivative, use the quotient rule, and then the extra step you have to do on this one is horizontal tangent lines when the derivative equals 0. So you should have one big fraction, and when your fraction equals 0 is when your numerator equals 0.
The derivative of x.
Well, you could distribute this. This is like negative sin x times 1, negative sin x times negative cosine x. Over here, you could distribute this to those, and then some of those terms are going to cancel out. And then you should cancel that. I hope that's not real. I'm making it still.
It's good.
No, I want to see.
It's real.
You're very trusting.
I know you won't steal it though.
You know I won't?
I thought you
No,
Mr. Kelson, I heard you trade stocks. You?
What I do is I encourage you to do your work.
Okay. I just heard from the source. I like to down stocks too.
Oh no, shame. I heard you. I'll see you later. Let's quiet.
You're too young to be getting in the stocks.
Why is that? Like now it's a good opportunity. It's like playing on it, basically. And it teaches you how to trade. So later in life, when you actually have money to invest, you know, you've already got one six out the way.
How much money do you have?
I cannot disclose that. It's not a lot. It's
Exactly. So you're risking the little bit of money you have.
right, but I can make that back if I get a job.
How? Do you get a job
Yeah.
so that you can gamble that money away too?
It's not gambling if you're trading stocks. It's not gambling. I'm basically buying low. You just gotta find the low. From undervalued to undervalued.
You think if it was that simple, people just wouldn't. Everybody wouldn't do it.
Wait, I heard you trade options.
I do.
What stocks you trade? If you don't mind me asking.
The only one I'm messing with right now is Children's Place.
Why did you buy undervalued?
I want to go.
It's way overvalued, so I'm short selling it.
No way.
Spike Crocs
Do what?
Spike Crocs
I don't know if I've ever been there, but it should be about a $5 stock, and it's like a $16 stock right now.
Should be fine.
Should be around a $5 stock, yeah.
What platform do you use?
Divided by
E-Trade.
Do you want
How do you sort from
Well, you have to request. You have to request permission. You have to get extra access granted.
Really? There's an option in there that's short, or how does that work?
Yeah, the thing is, you shouldn't be doing those things.
Trading in
There was somebody your age just like 2 years ago who shorted some stocks, and like what it showed him at the time is that he had lost all this money. He hadn't really lost it, but he didn't understand what he was doing, and then he killed himself. Yeah, because he thought he'd lost hundreds of thousands of dollars and he was a teenager. That's why you shouldn't be doing that stuff. You don't understand it yet.
Wait, but he showed he lost $100, but he didn't actually. He only lost however much he put in. But it's square.
That's true, but they try to estimate your account value on a daily basis, but they don't have good formulas for options, because it's like they only show you like, oh, if you change your mind and get out of it right now today at this time, like you're just like, get me out of that. they show you that price, which is not realistic because you wouldn't have got into it just to get out in a day or two. You have to stick it out. I prefer call options over put options. Nope, I'm not going to be responsible for that.
I do like this after I distributed everything.
Let's see, so negative sin x, positive sine cosine. This negative sign is going to worry me. This is going to be, yeah, see, you missed this sign here. This times this would be negative sine x, but times this negative makes that a plus. And then this would be negative sine x cosine x. But then because of that minus, makes it negative. So you got that one right, but then I think you're off on this one.
So then I'd get, but then that would one of those cancel out?
Yeah, that doesn't look right. That's the right answer?
Yeah. Which is why I was confused as to.
Minus.
Yeah, this guy CSGO roll.
Okay, we actually have a mistake up here. So you got derivative at the top times the bottom left alone minus. This is the derivative of the denominator.
Yep.
Okay, what's the derivative of 1?
0.
What's the derivative of cosine?
Negative sine.
What's the derivative of negative cosine?
Sine?
Yeah, so that should have been positive the whole time. This is negative sine, so that one should be positive.
Okay. So if it was like negative cosine, it would just be positive sine since the derivative of cosine is negative. Oh,
At the same time, there's those antecedents that are zero, so in my opinion, all they gotta do is look to the white part that came in and come in. Last one. I'm gonna do those. Because I was trying to do it off of memory first, and I was trying to keep myself from going back to my notes, but I couldn't go through the answers. I'm looking at the answers. I'm a slow worker. Because they're getting good.
I don't mind if you're a slow worker.
I'll show you. So
I'm worried about you staying on task.
I have some good stuff.
You're not worried about your test on Tuesday?
I'm pretty worried about that.
If you're not a little worried, you're not doing it right.
I'm very worried actually.
The first inside is the square root of x squared minus 9, and the second inside is the x squared minus 9.
There was one time he was telling me it was like
Three none of these, that's a bad sign. What's the answer then? Let's review solutions. I think one of them might be none of these. Okay, well right here, this is product rule. It looks like you're pulling the numbers from product rule. It makes me nervous that you're pulling the numbers straight at the same time as you're doing the product rule. Like I would just write out f prime g plus g prime f first, so you have more visual. And then the second, it's up right here. That needs to be plus.
Me too.
And so when you add those.
Yeah, I really like it. I really like my weekend is going to be so study because the SAT, the ACT, him, and are you taking a SAT?
Yeah.
That's how it feels. That's how it feels.
I got this book and it's so cute and I loved it.
I don't know if I'm gonna get enough scholarship. Because like, it's
How is the race energy is used? You know, I wrote this thing on my hand yesterday and it didn't wash it off, so I'm gonna write it down before like when there's attention.
And she was like,
No, so is it or is it just right?
I'm such a jerk. I see him playing on his Switch, and I'll watch his hand, and he's just like, he gets a piece of my bread. So you want to know where I'm going? It's good. I also have I would where I'm like, and then it's all like, we're focused on this now. I started doing it for a reason.
I wanted to go home for all my jobs.
wait.
But then he moved out.
I thought you meant your brother who used to Saturday.
No,
Like, I
my
hear
older
that.
brother, my older
I don't think I've done so much shopping. I really hate life. I hate that people shop my life.
Did you just say you can't online shop anymore?
I used to feel like God.
like literally, like I put together shopping lists on like things, and then I get my paycheck and I spend it like
All my stuff.
so then I was so happy to I just get bored. I just be like, what do I want to buy now?
My dad, or this weekend, my dad was like, make sure you do your shopping first. So like, this is the first time I've ever been encouraged to do your shopping. Literally. My dad like freaks out every time.
I made like fun clothes and you're sitting at the but I have to post
Okay.
I came out and I saw that.
Okay, let me do the first step, and then we'll compare. I'll do it on my.
Yeah. I only got 8 things.
Did you get A for It's okay. I see the right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to say baby. Hey, baby.
I was like in the middle of class. Wow.
Wait till
Where it's like make my water for the day.
yes,
They like poured out the water bottles into like the Stanley.
I
All
know
the powders.
and it's like not even water anymore. Like we feel like water in it. I'm like, bro.
When you take the derivative of that, the derivative of the inside wasn't 1, the derivative of the inside is 3 multiplied by a 3.
I'm gonna
There's a 3 in there.
calm down for a minute.
How much is it?
I don't know what this is. My course.
This classroom is always the coldest. Does he like it cold?
You don't need a teacher because you're thinking the first it's okay. All I did here is I moved this negative x on it and the double denominator. Well, to me,
I love waking up and running to the fish.
well, that 3 is from this.
Yeah,
You know, like
we should make clothes drinks now.
that was the longest thing.
Brayden is some really very sourdough Then you have a tray. Gravy, sourdough,
All denominator within the big
Bro, I made so much fun. Last night I really forgot I had to make Lily delicious for computer because I made it late because she's reading for
3t minus 2 to the 1/2 times 3
for and I was like,
to
my
the
teeth
1/2.
need some express frames.
Wait, where does he go to school?
Swanee.
Where is that?
It's in like Tennessee.
I love Tennessee. I
Multiply
love
it with the
Tennessee.
same base.
It's like a little
University of Tennessee is like 12 hours away from here. I'm not
It's
going
also
to.
the same as like the square root.
Right, yeah.
Okay, that's how I use it.
I just forgot to do
I'm gonna go to Hawaii.
So you get multiplied everything by the small denominator.
You
Not really.
You told me to like glasses.
I see. I did whenever I was like a
Wait,
little
I'm
year,
so
I was more into
Is
it.
that true?
So we just
no,
feel
like,
like
whenever I wear them, I was girl. But
the only
living in
friend that I
I
never
just like,
moved in with.
I feel like you would like crochet
But
now.
that's
Like,
because I was like,
I'm
I
trying to
remember
knit a
seeing
scarf
pictures, I
right
was
now.
like,
It's been 2
oh,
weeks thinking about it.
you saw progress coming
Yeah.
out.
I did a little, I guess the radio already came
You'll
down.
have it by the time you're in Michigan.
Exactly, and it's saving
I
me
should
which
get
is their
into
colors.
it really long.
Oh, you were planning ahead.
That's what they
I
say.
see, like, I would, like, I just never wore it, I guess.
You might double check. You might try the first part of it. So
I'm
kind of a
skier.
challenging thing.
I'm not a skier.
I'm trying to learn. I feel like it's
It's just the
it's kind of like basic math. YOLO.
it's the difference
Wait, yo-yo.
between
You're only.
quotient rule
Yeah,
that
we
we
just
practiced
follow
for
it.
2 days.
Every single
And then there was the chain rule that we practiced for 2 days. So pulling it all together at once just makes
Out
it
in Perth.
Oh,
Like, I remember he came back to the last one. And he
just
had
love
like,
it.
like a
I feel like I understand.
So this is something times something.
So we're gonna probably like bring my phone.
No. You can't take the derivative of this, but that stuff left alone, plus the derivative of that, left alone.
Sylvia and I are friends with
You know, it comes into like
you know, like, really cool. Thank you. We have a gavel.
Yeah,
I really, really.
Explain what I was Jewish.
Into February.
Anytime there's a verified that's not.
Babies are real good.
I was just white.
I love chocolate.
Maybe you should
Where
Bro,
bring the power down.
I'm gonna
Next
get
day,
paid for
I
my
had
chocolate.
power down.
lower the power
I
by
have to drive this dude
but like
and
derivative
I
of
can
the
save
side
it.
is
I
just
just
one.
put it on
Like,
my
one
life.
back, like, multiply by a derivative, multiply by one doesn't do it all. Double this, are still going to power down, lower the power by one. But because the derivative of the inside is one, you have to have that. So it's just always like my
So like, we had to do something like product or quotient rule, and then we might also do chain rule.
Chain rule is not in place of those. Chain rule is an additional step that you have to do sometimes after those.
Yesterday, I think two years. I've watched two people get rear ended. Yeah, I feel like it's a sign that I might be rear ended.
Oh my gosh, Gabby, I almost got him yesterday. Did you see that?
He was hurt.
No. After Ambassadors, I parked in like the handicap spot.
She's an orange one.
No, I'm actually.
Where's purple? Oh, yeah.
Yes, I did see it because
I was driving. Lily.
you were zooming.
She went, the girl must hit you. And I was like, really?
I was going to get her name. I was going to get you.
I was confused where you were because I didn't even recognize it was her because it really was her sitting on. I was like, where is this?
Okay, let me, if we could, let's talk about a few more questions up on the board here. It's been a little while since I offered to work with you out. So,
Did you do 43?
sure. All right, if you need help with 43, please follow along. If not, go ahead and keep going with whatever you were looking at. Okay, so with 43, if you want the derivative, what rule are we going to have to use?
Oh.
Quotient, because it's something divided by something. So we can take the derivative of the numerator, which you have to memorize, times the denominator left alone, minus the derivative of the denominator times the numerator left alone. And then the part that students sometimes forget is all over denominator squared. And then it just depends. If this is a fill in the blank, you can quit there. Technically, that is the correct derivative. If it's multiple choice, I'm sure they're going to reduce this. X squared divided by x would just be x. And then the only other thing that, well, I guess there's two more things you could do. These two both have an x, so you could factor it out. That's likely to be done. And then x divided by x to the fourth could also reduce. So this is as far as you could get. But you have to recognize why I use quotient rule. You have to either memorize the formula for quotient rule or know the pattern. And then all of the stuff that comes along with that. Derivative of natural log of x, power rule, GCF, cancel reducing fractions, etc., etc. Okay, is that all you needed from that? Okay, is there another question or two I can help with? Okay, I thought y'all would have a few more, but.
Could you do 38?
38? Okay, question 38. Would have to be, well, it doesn't have to be. You could either, guys, Derek, turn around please. I'm not going to talk over you. You could distribute the square root of x if you wanted to, and then you could avoid the product rule. But I'm going to just do the product rule. So derivative of the first, I can come back and show you why that's derivative if you need me to, times the second, bless you, left alone, plus the derivative of the second times the first left alone. And that is the product rule. And if I start looking for things that look like that, none of them quite look like this, so I don't know. They might have wrote this as one big fraction. And I just know that sometimes we get a common denominator. So I'll try to multiply this by 2 square root of x over 2 square root of x. Bless you. So that we get one big common denominator. And 3 square root of x times 2 square root of x would be 6x. And then these two can combine to be 9x. I've got a minus 1, and it's all over 2 square root of x. So that looks like it would have to be choice A. So regular old product rule. But in order to figure out which one of those answers was equivalent to it, you had to get a common denominator.
You could distribute the root x to this equation.
You could, yeah. If you'd rather distribute the square root of x to both of those and then do the power rule twice, you can, but your simplifying might be different. Your simplifying could be easier, it could be harder, but it might make the calculus easier. It's just a toss-up. Okay, so the part I skipped over pretty quickly here. Are you okay with square root of x having a derivative of 1 over 2 square root of x? Okay. It's just that we use that one so much that I hate explaining it 50 times, but I can if you don't see it. Okay, is that all you needed? Okay, one other thing to keep in mind while you make sure that you don't see any other questions before I switch it back to the agenda. I don't remember if our Tuesday test will be 40 or 50 points. It's one or the other, but that's pretty significant at this point in the year because right now you only have one major grade in. It was the limits test, and it was only a 20-point test or quiz. So that could be good. The fact that this is worth double or 2.5 times, or it could be bad. You could have aced the limits quiz, and then if you don't come prepared for this one, then your grade can drop quite a bit. The other thing to consider is that this stuff all gets easier because we keep using it all semester. But for the sake of your grade, obviously you want to be as up to speed as possible. But this isn't like going away like a lot of the limit stuff is. In the third unit, we'll do implicit differentiation and related rates, and those are both differentiation things. So we're still going to be doing power rule, product rule, quotient rule, chain rule in those topics. And then after that, we do something called first derivative test and second derivative test. And to find the first derivative and second derivative, you've got to be able to do product rule, quotient rule, chain rule, power rule. All this stuff just keeps on coming up. Derivative of e to the x being e to the x. You're going to see that the rest of the year. The derivative of natural log of x being 1 over x. You're going to see all the rest of the year. The derivative of cosecant x, negative cosecant x, cotangent x is going to pop up all year long. So it seems like there's a ton of stuff to memorize for this class. It's just that most of it is kind of up front. Most of the stuff you have to memorize for this class just kind of fits into this unit. There's just no way around that. So anyway, there's certainly incentive to put in a good effort for this test. Should make the rest of the semester a little bit easier for you and could potentially help pull your grade up really quite a bit, especially if you weren't happy with your limits score. Okay, let me offer one more time. We're about 20 minutes out. Is there another few questions I can help with on the board?
We did 54.
54. Okay, so 54, if I want to take the derivative of natural log of something, that's going to be 1 over the something. You okay with that part? Okay, but it was not natural log of x, it was natural log of some other stuff. So then you have to make sure for chain rule that you then take his derivative. The derivative of square root of x would be 1/2 over square root of x. And if you multiply these two, you're going to get 1 over 2x, which I'm surprised is not one of your answer choices. But why is this not the answer? Okay, so what? I didn't want the derivative?
You have to get the derivative of that
How do you know that?
because of the notation.
Okay, so if you're not looking super carefully, this didn't ask for the derivative, it asked for the second derivative. That one extra little tick mark forces me to work a little bit more here. So if I pull this up, if I rewrite it, for the second derivative at least I can just do power rule. Bring the power down, lower the power by 1, and they are never going to leave a negative exponent. So should be B as in boy. Memorize the derivative of natural log of something is 1 over something. Force yourself to do the chain rule, at least think about the chain rule, and then be careful that you got to take the derivative twice on that question, not just once. Yeah. 55? Huh? Okay. All right, so what rule would we need for 55? Product, power, quotient, chain. Quotient. Quotient means divide. So do derivative of the numerator times denominator left alone minus derivative of the denominator times the numerator left alone all over denominator squared. Okay. I don't know why that disappeared, but what number was that? 50 something? Okay, so now you could distribute the 3. You could multiply these two. You could combine like terms. All that's pretty common stuff, which is why I'm doing that so quickly, because I know I just do that most of the time. Still doesn't look like any of the answers, but it ends up being D because these two both have a 3 that you could pull out. And then I have no idea why they switched the terms, but they put the 1 first and the negative x squared next. And same thing down here. I have no idea why they switched the 1 and the x squared, but those are equivalent. So that's how they make that look like that. Just kind of weird way to write it. Also, just so you guys know, a lot of these questions are real AP questions from years and years ago that they've released. One thing that has, well, there's 2 things that have changed over the years. Many years ago, they used to take off points when you missed questions, like negative points. So not like you didn't earn the points, you get 0 for this question. It's like you lose points if you got it wrong. So if you didn't know, you shouldn't guess. You should leave it blank, so that's how you get 0 on a question. They don't do that anymore, although it was fine. It just changed the cut score. And 2, there used to be 5 multiple choices. That's why some of these have a 5th option. They only do 4 now. So none of these, of course, complicates every kind of question, but I could tell doing this question that it was probably going to be D pretty fast, because notice if you're doing quotient rule and you're going to put it all over the denominator squared, there's only one that even kind of looked like that. That's what made me think it was probably going to be D before I even got going. So sometimes you can make a nice educated guess. Okay, is there anything else about 55 that you'd like to clear up while it's still there? Okay, before I switch it back to the agenda, is there something else I can help with here?
Have you already worked 50?
Oh, I'm sure I've done it at some point. Oh, in this class, I have not.
Would you mind doing so?
Okay, well, what rule would you need for 50?
Quotient.
Okay, so quotient rule says derivative of the numerator, which would be negative sine x, times the denominator left alone, 1 minus cosine x, minus, now the derivative of the denominator. What do you think the derivative of the denominator is?
Sine x.
Very good. Negative sine x would be a positive sine x. It looks negative, but that's part of the quotient rule. Times the numerator left alone, all over the denominator squared. Now again, if I just 100% ran out of time here, what would you pick? Probably D. You see this denominator? There's only one with that kind of denominator. So if I had to guess, I'm going to guess D, just because it's the one that looks like that. But it could be that this simplifies into one of those. So to figure out how they got that exactly, you could distribute this. You could distribute this. Make sure you distribute the negative as well. Don't forget about the denominator. You could combine like terms. We've got a plus sine x cosine x and a minus sine x cosine x, so those go to 0. Negative sine x minus sine x would be negative 2 sine x over this denominator, which I was never able to do anything with, so D was correct. Okay, I'm going to switch it back to the agenda here. So as I was saying at the start of class, make sure that if you have late work, incomplete work, that you add that to your homework list. I will take up the circuit 27 and the test review 28 at the start of next class, unless you want to turn it in early to Google Classroom. Again, use the test review as a practice test. If you treat this as a practice test, you'll think the real test is much easier. I do have some extra copies of this test review, so if you'd like to redo some of it or all of it, help yourself. Those are going to be, all my extra copies are always in that bin over there. So anything in tab 28, you're welcome to take extra copies of anything. But this one's usually a little more popular. And we will have our test first thing on Tuesday. I think that's it for that. But feel free to keep working on that since you guys still have almost 10 minutes. But I will also switch the board to today's puzzle if you'd like to do that, just for a change of pace. Was this the one we did last time?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, then that's today's.
Why do you switch these around? Why do you switch out the...
Why? I have no idea why they did that.
But this is the answer though, right? I mean, I'm assuming it's this one. It's the only one that looks anything like it. Was it D?
Well, this isn't squared. You forgot to carry the square down.
That's
They just chose to write that numerator a little bit different.
So
See, if they distributed this would be a positive 3. If you distributed yours, you have a positive 3. If you distribute this 3, it's negative 3x squared. And if you distribute yours, you got negative 3x squared.
Oh.
So it is the same.
It's the same.
Yeah.
So they just switch it up like that for what? Like,
It could have been that they approached it in a different way, which was more natural for them to write it the way they did. But I don't know. There's not always a good rhyme or reason. Any guesses on how to do this? Johnny, you got any ideas?
I bet there's not even a real answer.
No, there's a real answer.
Is this like the Rubik's Cube thing?
No, that was for my own entertainment.
Is the top one the exponent?
I don't know. What do you think the answer is?
Can you give us a hint?
The answer is not 1. That's your hint.
If we just keep guessing numbers, will you tell us? Is it a whole number?
Well, you can't guess every number there is, so.
Yeah, but like at some point we're bound to hit it.
Okay, let's say that you guessed 37 and it was 37. Now what?
That's it. We got the answer. That's all we need.
No. It's not 13.
I have a strong feeling it's. But like other numbers in the timeline, it's supposed to make sense. Like add.
That's the puzzle.
They combine in the same way. So 6 times 9.
I will say this, there's something to do with 6, 2, and 4 that gives you 9. And then there's something to do with 4, 3, and 32 that gives you 2. And then if you do the same thing with 12, 2, and 24, you get your answer.
6 times 2. 6
All right, I guess y'all better go home and study this too, in case I put it on the test.
Is it 6 to the second? Like, is the top one an exponential power, and then it's divided by the one on the right?
Like what?
Well, like 6 to the second is 36, and divided by 4 gets you 9.
Okay.
So is that the formula for all of them?
I don't know. Does it work on the second one? What's 4 to the third?
So is it 6?
Yep. See? It wasn't that bad. Answer was 6.
That's going to be